Do you want to do the honors?
Yeah, give me 1 second.
I give you 2.
That's awesome. All right, so hi and welcome everybody. In case you don't know me, I'm Tom, shows on GitHub. I'm the primary maintainer of Tanka at the moment. I'm an employee of Grafana Labs and doing now a bit of history and some announcements. So for Grafana Tanka, we started the project nearly 1 year ago during my summer internship at Grafana Labs. And I think we've come a long way since then. Really, Tanka has grown from just an experimental thing to replace KSonnet to the one project to manage all of Grafana Labs Kubernetes-based infrastructure. And we already did 10 releases and have seen the Json ecosystem really grow during that time. And I think we have a very good position at the moment, and there's a kind of a bright future to come. So, a bit of announcement time. Tanka now has its own first logo. So it's the little ship thingy you can see on the updated tanka.dev website. And big shout out to Song, our internal designer, who did it for us. And I think it really looks nice. And also, Tanka now has a governance, which Richie will talk about. Richie.
Yes, I was muted. Also, you need to explain the play on words on Tanka.
I need to explain what?
Play on words on Tanka. Of course, it's a ship. Of course, you ship.
All right. Okay. So in German, Tanker or Tanker means cargo ship, and the Tanker logo is a bit of play on words on that. And also where the name Tanker originally comes from, the JSON language is like a bit of a pun to sonnet, and Tanka is like another ancient form of poetry. Actually, I kind of don't know what it really is, but it was the first thing on Wikipedia I found that would have made a nice command on the comment line.
And the final one is the sunset. It's the Grafana colors, but also we had Song flip around the gradient, so now it's actually a ship sitting calmly in the sunset without any operational fires needing to be put out or something.
So finally bringing Kubernetes configuration into calm waters.
Exactly. So we're really nerded out on that one.
That's very nice. You mentioned the new logo, but I was just on the website a couple of minutes ago, and I realized the website is also new. So
yeah, we did update the front page.
Nice.
Because probably Gophers and Google font doesn't fit the project anymore. Even though the Gophers look nice.
Yeah, it was a super placeholder, but now we have an official logo, and maybe we'll even get stickers. Or no, we'll most definitely get stickers.
In case we do have a conference anytime.
No. I talked to Gina. She will actually stock that website. We have this web shop thingy, and they'll also up stickers and everything. So we'll do this for real, like proper.
There you can order a single sticker for €2. That's a good deal.
I mean, we're diverging in topics more and more, but I have those, and I want to try and get.
All right. These are glowy. They are definitely worth €2 then.
Holographic, yeah, they're more expensive, but they're super nice. So anyway,
most off-topic talk of our times.
That's the beauty of the community call. As long as people are having fun and as long as it's somewhat useful, that's all on topic. Governance. Tanka has a governance now. It's modeled after the Grafana governance, which itself is modeled after the Prometheus governance. So some of you might be familiar with it. By and large, how it works is once you're actually a team member, there is rough consensus modeled on the IETF rough consensus model, but without the chair. Of course, the assumption is that everyone will be working together quite nicely, but also you have a system of voting and supermajority voting in case no consensus can be reached. Yep, and that's about it for the governance.
Awesome, thanks. So next agenda item: upcoming features, projects, and how to get involved.
So I think I was just going to say a little bit more about the governance. You know, in a way, from my perspective, it just says it's like in most cases things work and people submit stuff and it just works. And governance just covers those cases where it might not quite work as smoothly as you might hope. And how do we know when someone says, "Hey, I want to help"? How do we know when the point is to say, "Come on in, become a full team member," and so on? What are the processes through which that happens, and so on? And that's what governance really makes clear. And once you've got it all agreed, then there's no argument about it, because we all know and have agreed on a common way of working. So it just makes working as a community much more straightforward.
Yes, and also entering it from the outside. I mean, there's also the obvious stuff like code of conduct and such to just show that we're not horrible, but also giving more or less a guideline of, hey, I want to actually join that bunch of people because I care about the software which they're writing. There is now a clearly, or at least better defined path to become a member of that group, as opposed to just like hang around and maybe stuff happens, maybe it doesn't, and we'll toss a dice every 6 months. So yeah, this is basically about the structure, but ideally the perfect governance is the one which you look up every time you want to onboard a new member, and else you ignore it exists. That's the perfect type of governance, and that's very much how that governance aims to be lived. That it's just out of the way, but it's there if you need to actually have a structure.
Right. Awesome. So now upcoming features. The first thing we can kind of showcase or at least announce is that we've been working on a replacement for the long deprecated Kubernetes library. A technology preview of the new thing is located at the link I've just posted. Everybody, please keep in mind, it's definitely a technology preview, so I don't think it has been used by anybody in production yet, or even used by anybody. We don't even do it internally yet, but we plan on converting our whole code base to that as soon as possible. The new library is again a Go-based generator that takes the swagger.json from the Kubernetes cluster and transforms everything it can find in there to JSON boilerplate code, so you don't need to write that yourself anymore. Also, because it uses a slightly different design, it is much more performant. So in my personal testing, I've seen performance improvements of up to 90%, which I think is definitely a good step in the right direction, because JSON evaluation at the moment is rather slow, to phrase it not too bad. This library
evaluation you're talking about, I suppose, right?
Well, native JSON, yeah, right. JSON evaluation in combination with the KSONet library is very slow.
Yeah.
JSONet itself works very well. So that thing should help there a lot. And I would be very happy if everybody who's feeling kind of a bit lucky would go and try that out if it works for everybody. And if not, just open an issue on the repository and we will do our best to fix that.
Something worth pointing out, I think, looking at the page you just posted, is the different versioning of Kubernetes, like generated libraries. Because I think that was something we discussed during FOSDEM, right? That like, what does KSONet Beta 3, KSONet Beta 4, what does it even mean, right? So essentially, I think the idea going forward is we want to have kind of like an up-to-date generated version per Kubernetes version, so that you can literally just pick, I want to use the JSON Kubernetes library for Kubernetes 1.15, and it will kind of stay the same. But we might even, I suppose, like, correct me if I'm wrong, we might even like update this under the hood, but the API from the outside should stay the same. So kind of like with an improved generator, we might be able to even like improve the performance under the hood.
That's exactly. Basically, the idea here is to use the path-based versioning for the Kubernetes version. So even if we do generator upgrades, bug fixes, and things, the repository tag might change, but you can still lock your project on the targeted Kubernetes version.
Perfect. Very cool.
And the other thing you were saying to me as well is that it's not entirely compatible, because there are certain features that are used in the current library that make it less, that cause that 90% slowdown. So for example, the saying container.new .with ports, .with this, .with that is the thing you don't get. Instead, you say container.new plus container.with ports plus so it's very small shifts in how you write your code, but you will have to do some adjustments. You should be able to. I suspect you should be able to do those adjustments before you switch to the new library. Make your your code base compatible with both, and then you switch.
Exactly. That's like the one thing that we need to break the API in to gain a big performance win. I think that's a fair trade-off, and everybody should be able to live with that. As we don't do a backwards breaking change, you just need to use a different style of the old API.
I'm happy to break our dependencies on that. That's for sure. If we can get the performance improvements, then yeah.
Awesome.
So along with the generated components, is there any manual, like helper functions or things like that we stick in, or is it purely generated?
At the moment, it's mostly purely generated, but already in the old Json library, they had custom written constructors. So all of the new functions were actually made by hand. And the new library has a pretty sophisticated patching system where the final API outcome is based on a combination of generated resources and custom written library parts. So we can also think about moving some of the improvements we have made in our causal extension into the main library to provide like the most simple API for people to use we can.
Yeah, I think that would be great, because like looking back at Json, in many ways, it often didn't even reduce the amount of code you had to write, right? Like I just recently kind of like more like went into the direction of just writing pure JSON objects for like the Kubernetes object, and it's crazy how much fewer code it is. So if we can like really try to improve the experience there, that would be helpful. Like get the 80% really easy, like with the like helper functions, but then still be able to like merge things on top, which is like the main benefit of using JSON, right? So
yes, exactly. So I think we should aim for a good combination of simple to write code and a bit of these more intelligent or magic parts. For example, what I really like in the Corsa library is the service for helper. So you can just pass it a deployment and it already automatically extracts all of the service required things out of there and just creates the service for you without you having to write it by hand. And I think if we can find a good set of similar helpers, that might be really nice.
just my 2 cents. Looking at Q, the what is it? Conform, unify,
Execute.
Execute. Yeah. Woo. I should look that up again. Like so Q kind of takes a different approach, right? Where you more or less like write high level objects, and then you would say, I want to expose these parts. and then actually it takes these higher level objects and then puts the ports into a Kubernetes service and the same port into a deployment. So it kind of I think we could kind of I mean, this all discussions we should have probably going forward, but the reason why I'm kind of opposed to have kind of such a magic helper function is it really hides the complexity from the people, but in a bad way. We can still have something where we specifically say we want to expose these things, but then if we just pass an object of type deployment into some helper function, no one really knows what's going on, I think, and that's kind of a bad move, I would say. Yeah, but let's have discussions going forward.
Yeah,
Definitely.
I'd certainly be very curious to see examples of what you're talking about.
Sure.
All right. So I think next agenda item is the Json-Libs GitHub organization, which Malcolm will talk about.
Will I? No.
I think so. I can do as well if I should. But
you talk about that one. I'll talk about the next one.
Okay. So I don't know if many people realized yet, but we did create a new organization on GitHub called Json-Libs, which is focused around building libraries for JSONnet and also enhancing the JSONnet library ecosystem. Also in terms of documentation generation and everything around these things. The first library included there is bespoke new Kubernetes library, but we hope for everybody to go and contribute libraries there if possible. Give me a second, I will add a link. Oh, Malcolm already did. Yeah. Cool, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's really cool. The one concern that I kind of have right now is we had the Kubernetes or Kube JSONet org or something like this, right? Yes. The concern here being we should clean things up before creating yet another org.
Yes, definitely. I think if nobody minds, that would be the end of the Kube JSON.org org then.
I think it was just the both of us anyway. So we can just go forward and clean that one up for sure.
Right, we should give people that have used or kind of broken fork over there the chance to migrate first, but yes. All right. Also, the Json-Libs organization includes an ecosystem repository, which is meant to provide a place where we can collect ecosystem-related things like, for example, a list of all libraries that are maintained under Json-Libs and also other libraries maintained by other people, so you have a central place to discover them. And in the long run, we are currently thinking about how we could maybe even build a website along the lines of the Arch User Repository or Helm Hub, where you can just search for libraries for the application you want to deploy, and then just include them into your project.
Yeah, that would be really cool. I don't know if Pavel from Red Hat, from the monitoring team, he works with us, reached out. He kind of created a monitoring mixins website. So essentially it shows you the alert, essentially for all the mixins that are there, he generates a default set of rules and alerts, and I don't know about dashboards. And I think because we have the advantage of kind of having both in terms of the capabilities to have Kubernetes objects generated with JSONnet, but additionally we can also generate Prometheus ecosystem related things with JSONnet, right? I think that's kind of a bonus point we kind of have here over Helm. So I think we should try to work together to basically have kind of a packaged system where we show these are the Kubernetes manifest objects, but you also get alerts and dashboards and rules next to all of it.
definitely. That's
Let me
like one of
try to
the
find the website.
Yes, that's one of the coolest things Tanka and the JSON ecosystem can probably provide, that you just install an application to Kubernetes and you get monitoring, and in the best case, even world-class monitoring out of the box with dashboards and alerting rules and recording rules and all of what matters. Just basically for free additionally to installing the application.
Yeah, and my bit of this is total dreaming, but my dreaming there is just a place where anyone who has JSON related code, whether it's for, it could be for deploying to my car, for all it matters, but it's JSON. Do I need to distinguish between JSON, between Tanka and Quebec and Kubernetes and monitoring mixins or all these other things, Grafana based ones or not? Actually, we could just have a JSON thing with tags. And anything that uses JSON can benefit. And, we're a small enough world at this point that we should be working together.
Yep.
So I can go on to the bit that I get to speak about. So in that regard, if we're talking about possibly having this space where we have, if we imagine this wonderful Arch or apt or npm like thing where we can go and find libraries, in a way the easy thing is writing the tool. The hard thing is getting together the list of libraries. So what would be really good would be for us to start talking about, hey, I've got this library, oh, I've got this library, and just start stimulating the conversation around what resources are there already out there, created by any of the JSON communities. So it may be that Quebec, for example, has this most shit-hot library that does something incredibly useful that works for us. And a bit like you have Cortex and Thanos, who at first were in competition, and now they have common committers in common and sharing code bases and things. It's what you can do in open source. And it would be wonderful if we could start that conversation about how we share what resources, what JSON code is out there that could be useful to be shared, and see how that comes together. My suggestion was, look, if you've got libraries, share them on #Tanka on the Grafana public Slack. If someone wants to suggest another location, I'm open to it.
Yeah, not a real opinion on this, but I do think, like, are you talking about like there's already in the Kube JSON organization, there's an ecosystem repository where things were started to be written down. There were like, essentially we have a couple of places. Okay, never mind, that repo is empty, but we have a couple of places where we kind of just need to go in and collect them and kind of like talk to the people who already have started collecting a bunch of things, like my colleague Pavel, who created the monitoring mix and website. So I think at this point it's mostly, yeah, exactly. There's awesome libs in it. I think I created once awesome JSON it. So there are like a handful of projects that try to do this right now. Some more up to date than others, but like the real hard thing is talking to people and try to come together and try to figure out how to like really have this like central location, right?
Yeah, and in a way I'm saying, perhaps we just do the first stage, which is getting people to talk, just telling people, hey, if you've got stuff, come and tell us. We might not do anything with it yet, but come and tell us, because it might stimulate something that could be really cool. So we don't necessarily promise to do anything with the stuff. We just ask people to share with us and tell us what they're doing.
Yep.
I think like from my perspective, I think we should try to consolidate the lists and repos we have, like awesome JSON, awesome KSonnet, awesome something, then the monitoring mix inside, then the things you're working on. Try to consolidate this, and then basically, I think, like from my perspective, let's have a GitHub repo that's designated, and then really just have people open issues and say, hey, I worked on this, take a look.
Just an idea, maybe just to do a quick win here. I think I do like the approach I took on the awesome Libs.net repository, where we have a bunch of YAML files which collect the actual information and just transform that to a couple of output formats, for example, a markdown file. And I think we could just shift these efforts over to the Json-Libs ecosystem repository, because the name just fits that as well, and try to collect everything we know about in there. And as soon as we got enough, just try to bring some structure into that.
Yeah, sure. Let's do it in one way or another. And I think like we should talk to Pavel and then try to already get like monitoring mixins into that as well, so we can kind of tell the big story.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see what monitoring mixins there are out there.
I pasted the website in the doc.
I'll later.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Cool. So okay, so I guess we did cover all of the agenda items we do have for all sites. So it's probably open discussion and Q&A now. So in case somebody has issues with Tanka or even JSONet itself, just please do tell us and we can see what we can make of it. So does anybody want to raise a voice?
Maybe one note, it's not really a question. I can also enable my camera, then you can see me.
Awesome.
Yeah, one
Hi.
thing I like about the Tanka project is that it was, for me, it was the first time that there was actual documentation how to use JSONet with Kubernetes, and which made it finally accessible. And now that we start to build some websites or repositories to aggregate existing libraries, I also checked out the Mixin website Matthias posted, and I think it would really benefit if we not only create a list of those, but also, yeah, like some guidance how to use them, because often those collections of libraries are, yeah, exactly that, a collection, just a list, but a bit more advanced examples of how to use several of those libraries in one project in Tanka, for example, would be really helpful to get started if you are new to the ecosystem.
Right. I think that's a bit similar to something I did discuss with Malcolm internally, where you have a website where you can search for all of the libraries you want to use with Kubernetes, and then has something similar to an install button, where it just shows you a JSONet snippet that you can integrate into your code base that gives you that exact library.
Yeah.
And I think also in your case, if you're talking about monitoring mixins in and of themselves are useless. They don't do anything. They just shove something into your JSONet out script that then is ignored. Because, so they are designed to be consumed by another library. So you need to have a library alongside the monitoring mixins. That's what the word mixin actually means. So you have a library and you mix those mixins into your library. So you have so the one we use is Prometheus KSonnet, unfortunately named, but a brilliant piece of code. So you use the Prometheus KSonnet library, you then add into that your mixin, and then that renders the Grafana dashboards. It creates config maps to store the dashboards in. It wires those up to Grafana for you. It handles all of your Prometheus configurations. It installs Prometheus, wires that, and it just, so all of the stuff inside the mixin ends up deployed into your Kubernetes cluster because that library did the work.
I think currently the libraries which do something like that are Prometheus Ksonet, Kubernetes, Grafana's agent library, and to some extent the Grizzly tool of you, Malcolm, right?
So the Grizzly tool is just for pushing dashboards to Grafana, and is intended to just to make that initial stage of, it's like, actually, if every change you want to make to a dashboard, you have to deploy to Kubernetes. It's just a really slow thing because it has to do difficult across your entire cluster namespace. So Grizzly is just pushed straight to a Grafana instance for development purposes.
Right.
Certainly, if you're using Kubernetes, it would just be a development purposes thing.
One
Could
thing,
we just say, could we list those in the doc, Tom? Could you just list what those libraries are? Because I would like to see.
Yes, for sure.
one other thing that, like, on a similar note, I've been discussing with Pavel for the monitoring mixin project is actually something that I kind of did for the SLO library that I wrote, the Json-Libs project, where essentially you have a web UI where you can put in like selectors for the job or the Prometheus that you're running, like just like as key value pairs, and then it takes all of that and essentially runs the JSON generation on the server side, on the server, like on the backend, and just gives you back like the YAML that you need to copy paste and deploy, right? So essentially what we've been kind of discussing is, as a stopgap into something that is a bit more advanced in the future, we already could do something where, like, for the mixins, for example, we could have like give us a namespace you want to deploy these things to. Give us like some name for like the instance of, I don't know, like Jaeger you want to deploy or something like this, right? And then essentially just like with a click of a button and like 2 seconds while generating JSON on the server side, we then print YAML to the website so that the user essentially just has to copy paste things, and they can copy paste it into their GitOps kind of workflow going forward still, right? So they can choose to just like as a test, like one-off thing, deploy to the cluster and be done with it, or put it in GitOps, kind of like take it from there. And I think certainly something like that would be possible not only for the mixins, but like also for even like for Ksonet, like Kubernetes related deployments. So essentially we could generate the entire like, for example, Kubernetes project, which comes with Kubernetes objects and all the rules and alerts and dashboards. Depends on who is hosting that, right? Like, might be quite resource intense to run a bunch of generations all the time.
Right. So basically, you're proposing kind of a JSON as a service where you have an API endpoint that you feed in your configuration data that shovels those into JSON and returns to YAML.
It's more like you kind of register your JSON library with a project, with a website, and you say you can configure a namespace, you can configure these various things, and then from that we kind of like build a configuration object on the server side, and then you just put it into the configuration that needs to be run. Essentially taking the burden of like installing JSON, running JSON bundler, and all of these things, at least for people who just want to have like a one-off thing. And then for more advanced users, like obviously something like Tanka is the way to go. And then, yeah.
I think that sounds like a fantastic way in, easing the job. All you do, go to this website, grab some YAML, push it to your cluster. Does this work?
I think that aligns quite well with something similar we do on the Grafana agent repository, where we concatenate the entire Tanka output and put in some env subs variables in there where people can just run a single command on their machine. And if we could turn that into a bit more sophisticated service where we tell the service at which configuration variables are available and where to put these into the final JSONet, and then just evaluate that, we could basically provide like the Kubernetes YAML service for all applications which have JSONet or Tanka manifests.
So I'd quite like to just go back, and because we've diverged a reasonable way away from what Max was asking. Did we answer your question, Max, or is there still more to it?
No, it's all right. It was also not completely a question. It was more like a side note that it would be great to add like more documentation above only listing the libraries. Yeah, that was my primary point. But yeah, thanks for all the input.
Thank you.
Right. So,
Any other questions or inspirations or frustrations that anyone would like to share? Or just simple stories, how are you using it? What brought you to this meeting? Why was this meeting interesting enough to give up an hour of your day for?
meeting apparently isn't interesting.
I want to give others the chance to speak up.
Matthias sent me the link and asked if I want to join, and I thought, yeah, why not? I can check in what's going on with Tanka. I don't use it anywhere in production. I use it for some private experiments where I currently have most stuff deployed with Helm. And it's super annoying to manage the monitoring stack with Helm. So I started to look more into Tanka and JSONet in general. And yeah, but it's like my private free time. And for work, we use JSONet, but not with Tanka so far. But yeah, we don't use it a lot there.
When you say you use JSONet, but not with Tanka, do you use JSONet with Kubernetes or for other reasons?
Yeah, with Kubernetes. Yeah.
Do you use a library for Kubernetes?
Yes, it's using KSNet. It was originally deployed when KSNet was still maintained. And it's, there it is used for the monitoring stack as well. I'm not sure if it uses Kubernetes or not. Off the top of
I think that's what you're using. We've discussed
a
couple of months ago. So you're basically using Kubernetes, and Kubernetes, like I talked to Tom about this during FOSDEM. The problem kind of is that Kubernetes itself is more of a library and doesn't really Tanka's use case and workflow doesn't really fit Kubernetes. So I think the way going forward would be helpful for people would be kind of to, outside of Kubernetes, have an example how to use Kubernetes if they would want to deploy it with Tanka, because it's kind of like just another library that you consume with Tanka. So yeah.
Exactly, Kubernetes itself is just a library like Prometheus KSonnet is, or all of the other things, and it's one of the pieces that can be consumed by Tanka, but it itself should not be have any connection to Tanka really. One thing that I've noticed with Kubernetes where it does not play too well with Tanka's assumptions is that it outputs these list objects of Kubernetes instead of returning the plain resources. This kind of sets Tanka a bit off at the moment. We could work around that, but I kind of would like to hear the idea behind wrapping all of these into lists instead of just outputting YAML streams.
I'm not 100% sure. I think you're like talking about the example JSON file that we have in our project, right? So
I think so.
Yeah, as it says, it's just an example, and you could basically copy and modify the example JSON to kind of your needs. And really, if you need to change things in there, it's totally fine. Where it would become a problem would be if you really need to change anything inside the JSON/Kubernetes subfolder. Then we should really have a conversation about that. But those should be basically per component we have an object, and then within those object we have like another object per Kubernetes object that we create. So for example, we have like the Prometheus adapter is like a top level project object, and then inside of that one we have a deployment object, a service object, and so on and so forth. So yeah, like it's just an example JSON, so don't take it too seriously. And I think we can work with something that should work for Tanka as well.
I'll take a look there and let you know what would be required.
Sure.
Actually, I just noticed I missed something in the agenda I wanted to talk about, which is this project I've just put into the chat, which is like my experimental take on building something like GoDoc for JSONnet. And as many people who attempted to do something similar before already realized that JSONnet kind of lacks a bit of structure for doing something like GoDoc, because there's no clear starting point for generating like documentation like Go has with packages and functions, and there can't be anything more nested or something like that. And with JSONnet, I've tried to just define some kind of structure inside of JSONnet by injecting special elements which are prefixed with a hash in the according like key. And I do admit it's probably not the most easiest syntax, and there could be done a lot to improve that, but it at least proves to be working and gives functional libraries like the KLS Alpha 1 a generator which can output markdown documentation, which does work well. But I would like everybody to consider how we could convert that into something more general for all JSONnet libraries.
Are you planning to also make that part of Tanka and then potentially enable saving of runbooks and such, and also maybe even jumping over mixins, so you have a consistent thing of dashboard and runbook and alert and configuration?
To be honest, I did not yet think about that, but it sounds reasonable to do so, and unifying things is probably always a good idea. And regarding integrating that into Tanka, I'm not sure if it could become a tkdoc subcommand at some point, but so far I just plan to move it from off my personal GitHub to the Json-Libs organization.
I think it would have value to at least be able to extract it, or to work, like at least baseline work with it through Tanka, because then you have that one-stop thing, which is basically used for mangling all the JSONet stuff, more or less.
Also, the project is kind of twofold. Like it's already explained in the README of that thing, that it is a data model and a markdown generator. So the thing we extract from JSONnet, like the packages and the function definitions, they cannot be only used to generate documentation, but also, for example, to build code autocompletion, where you just like using a language server or similar. But this would need a lot of more work.
I really like the idea, but I think it needs a bit more thought. So
Probably.
I'm not even sure. I'm not even sure if we should move it to the org just yet. Just like my 2 cents. So what I would propose going forward is to kind of like get other folks into the conversation, because I haven't heard it here first now. Like from people from who work on JSON bundler on the different kind of libraries and stuff, and then yeah, maybe even write up a design doc around this, because like what we've kind of like so far always have been discussing, at least for runbooks, and they might be a special case though, is to basically have like a hidden object next to the alert definitions, so we wouldn't even like put the runbooks into comments. But I do still see the value for generating such a doc, like that's for sure. So I'm definitely happy to discuss and try to come up with something going forward.
Also, you're speaking of comments. The reason why it's not using comments here is that I did target at the Kubernetes library, where we override the final documentation outcome in these custom handwritten patch files, and with like at once we can't even extract comments because the JSON-Libs parser just does not really work for that too well. And also we would never be able to do the sophisticated merging with comments as well. So we kind of hijack the JSON engine itself to merge the documentation for us as well.
Okay, yeah, I need to read through the README you wrote up, because apparently I didn't understand it just yet.
I would love to hear some feedback on that, definitely, because it's just like an idea, and I don't know if it's something we want to go forward with, but it was my best take so far.
I think there is inherent value of having configuration and documentation live together, because this means you can also, if you do updates, you can't really, I mean, you can still forget it or you can ignore it, but it's a lot harder to forget, and you can't conceivably argue that you didn't ignore it on purpose, like it's right there, so you can't forget. And I think this has value in and as of itself, if it's done basically like in a way where it's modularized, but if you do it, it's just part of the complete package and behaves natively, if that makes sense. Like you don't force people to use it, but if it's being used and if it's being used as a part of the thing, then whatever is the right thing should just happen. Like, do what I mean, kind of.
Yes, yeah. Fully agree. The problem we've also been seeing is that we kind of have the alerts and then we handwrite the runbooks and they continuously go out of date. So fully agree. Sorry, Michael.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, once you've got the documentation docs traveling alongside the code in some format, and then you put those into your repository, the awesome JSON type thing we've talked about, all of a sudden you've got your free documentation site as well for any library that goes in there. You've got GoDocs, which is, which would be blow away really compared to what the situation has been. And it's kind of for free. I mean, my only question looking at the doc is that the most concise and clean way of doing it? It's a real shame you can't have the hash without the quotes. For example, it's just things like that that just make it seem a bit, when I did first look at it, it did take me a little bit of a while to work out what you were actually saying. People are used to comment based.
Yes, definitely.
Documentation, And yeah, so there is a bit of overhead here, cognitive overhead for people to get their heads around what they're doing and why. And that's the problem I have with it. Not that, I think the idea is great. The way the power of what you're suggesting is great, but it's like having to quote your element names.
Yeah.
Just kind of goes against something. Just adds an extra level of cognitive process that I would really, really like to avoid.
Also, you basically need to write things twice. Like you define the function, and then you need to define exactly the same information again just for docs on it. So we might be able to improve the situation with desugaring if you on the README just scroll all the way down. There in the second last paragraph, I had an idea how desugared syntax for that might look like, which probably is better, but I don't know if it's good already. This, however, would need changes to the JSON compiler.
Yeah.
I mean, this is almost more like a JSON language feature. We do know, I think Dave Cunningham is his name. So we should probably just set up a call with him and discuss this, because like this is not something we need to kind of like do ourselves, or even maybe he has a lot of more thoughts on this to begin with, right?
Yes.
We're just more like from the consumer perspective of JSON-Net, but it would be really great to talk to him and see what kind of like language people think about this. Just came to my mind saying it needs a language change.
Sounds like a very good idea.
What,
Do you want to reach out to him to set up some kind of talk?
Sure, I can do that.
Cool, thank you.
I would be curious to hear if you know that's who is maintaining. Is he a Googler? Are they?
Yeah.
Is he doing that in his own spare time? Is it in active use there?
Yeah, I think it's hard to tell actually, but like it is constantly being worked on as far as I can tell. So like, yes, like we should just talk to him anyway and see what he's up to. Like I haven't talked to him in about a year, so it might be worth doing and checking in anyway.
He's Spark Prime on GitHub, right?
Yep.
Also, I have trouble pronouncing his name, but what about Stanislav Bazowski? He seems to be the JSON-Net maintainer. Oh.
Maintainer of what?
I'll post a link in chat.
Okay.
At least he's doing all of the commits to the JSON-Net Go compiler.
Okay, yeah. That might have. Yeah. I mean, we can just talk to Dave, because like I've talked to Dave previously, and then maybe he can point us to Stanislav, and we can just take it from there. Whoever kind of like Dave says is the right person to talk to, I just assume he knows who they are. So.
Yep. Awesome. All right. So in case there is nothing urgent anymore, I would say we're done for today.
I think that's fair.
That's good. I will definitely try to get Pavel and maybe Frederick and a bunch of other people into this call next time, because cool. I think a lot of the things that we discussed here are very, very close to what the monitoring team on a daily basis uses for like our production systems too, right? Like everything is JSON-Net based in terms of configuration and so on and so forth. So hopefully I can convince a few more people next time. Was
Cool.
kind of on a short notice this time for me.
Yeah,
I
admit we kind of failed communicating this a bit. So
it's all good. It's the first time, so there's
Yeah.
always a second time to improve.
Exactly. Grows over time. That's completely fine.
all right. So
Very
see
good.
you in 1 month, everybody. Thanks for showing up.
See ya.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Thank you. See ya.